All right, we are live. Welcome everybody to this live session. So as you noticed, this time is a little bit earlier for you guys in the US. Apologize for that. That's because I was really engrossed in this book, and 1 week was not enough to finish this. As you can see, I have made like thousands of notes and tags, and I'm talking about this wonderful book by Janny Wurts, Peril's Gate, which is part of the Wars of Light and Shadow epics fantasy book series that Janny Wurts has gifted to the world. I mean, I am still overwhelmed. I finished it yesterday night. So it definitely took like around 15 days for me to finish this book, but it's because I wanted to savor every minute because there was no moment of, what do you call it, boredom in it, even though it was like what, 750 pages. So I'm still processing, thinking, reeling from the aftermath of what happened. And I'm sure all of you are eager to share rant, vent. So before we get into all that, a quick round of introduction of our panel. And also, maybe because our time has changed, that's why I'm not expecting many people live, because a lot of our regular people who join, they messaged me saying that they will play the replay because it's too early for them. So, okay. So, Paul, do you want to start?
Okay, get off mute first. Hey, Angie, thanks so much for having me. You're so wonderful for putting this together to discuss the books of an iconic writer like Janny. I'm so privileged to be here with people like Blaze. Blaze has been such a champion of Janny's works, and he's the first one that really got me onto them. He does that because he has a talent and an knack for unearthing books that, again, as per his moniker, under the radar. That said, Janny's book should not be under the radar
Mm.
because she's an iconic writer that needs to be mentioned with all the the Ericksons and the Jordans, etc. And we know that. But in any case, and great to be here with Nico, another fabulous reviewer, who I think he's gonna stay awake for this one for sure because I know he's also caught on to the series and is loving it, and he brings such great insights. But yeah, just honored to be here with such an esteemed panel. Obviously, Janny Wurts is my favorite writer. This is my favorite series, and I'm just happy and honored to be here. So thank you.
You want to go next, Nico?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Nico from Nico's Book Reviews, and I very much am in agreement with what Paul was saying. I have absolutely loved this series. I did end up finally. I've read ahead at this point because I couldn't stop myself from doing it. So I am like 40% through Initiate's Trial at this point. So I've got like a book and a half or so left, and there's just so much. But Peril's Gate, especially, I have been looking forward to talking about this particular book because this was just such a huge and important book in the series that had so many great moments, and just really, really got us ready for what's to come. But I've been enjoying the heck out of this. Absolutely love this series and the books and Janny's writing as well. And yeah, I've had a fantastic time. So thanks for having me back again. Um, it's even though I know I joked about how early it is, I feel like it's worth it to talk to this group, to talk to with you and Janny, and I have a feeling that yeah, talking Peril's Gate will open the synapses and get them firing. So
Right. Please.
Oh, hi, everyone. Blaze from Under the Radar SFF Books. I've been joining this live stream has been a real joy. I remember first going through this series. It was just Jan and I just doing DMs back and forth, and the shock that I had first reading this series. Janny knew what was coming, and now I get to relive that, seeing your guys' reactions to reading these books for the first time. It's truly a joy. Peril's Gate, in particular, I remember first reading it and I was just shocked and blown away. There's a reason that a lot of fans say that this is probably the best published book that Janny has in the series, and there's a lot of reasons why. And I can't wait to discuss it here with everybody. Yeah, been looking forward to this one for quite a few months now. So, very happy to be here.
That's great. So if if you have to explain this book in one word, like just one word, what would it be, Paul?
One word, I would say shocking. Shocking.
What about you, Nick? Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry.
Nico, how would you describe it in one word?
I would cheat a little bit and describe it as Janny did before, as pivotal, because that's very true.
Okay. And Blaze?
Groundbreaking, because everything you've seen before really comes into focus now, and everything afterwards that you're going to read always comes back to this one point, particularly towards the end, but that's from the spoiler territory. So groundbreaking.
Right. For me, I mean, this is a word that I consistently use for, I think, all the books after War Host, I think, and that's devastating. It started with Chaol's death, and then it never stopped. It just continued, and there are some things that in here also really I was like really shocked and didn't expect it coming, and I sometimes wanted it just to stop, just stop with it, just stop messing with my feelings, Janny. That was my thought when I was reading this, but in a good way, of course. Quick, spoiler-free, 5 minutes maybe. Overall, I don't know what's going to happen. So obviously, I do not have the perspective that Blaze has, to see what the position of this book is, what exactly this book means in the series. But as a first-time reader, I felt that this book was, especially last book was definitely fast-paced. A Grand Conspiracy was fast-paced than the rest of the books, and it continues that pace. And there is so much happening in each page. You can see so many things happen microscopically also in personally what's going inside everybody's mind, what people are thinking, but at the same time you get this macroscopic view also of what's basically happening in the plot and how it is changing the course of where the story is going to. So that was quite interesting, and also I loved how much focus it brought into the what is it called? The strength of love between Arathon and Lara. How did I forget her name? Lara. So I enjoyed reading those. I'm sure you know what I'm referring to, but those chapters were my favorite, along with the parts of Earl Jarrett, and how he reminded me of Chaol a lot. So overall, I would, if you ask me to rate it, I think I will rate it 11 out of 10.
That seems
because,
fitting.
right? I think anybody who has read this book can disagree with me. It is definitely an 11. Go ahead. Anybody can start with your spoiler-free review.
Well, what's crazy is you mentioned how much is packed in there and like how quickly everything moves. The next couple of books, especially, the pacing is so much faster, and so it was like almost shocking. Like I'm like, oh, we are really going. Yeah, Peril's Gate really gets us where we need to be to do that, which is great. But This book, it's so hard to pick favorites. Like the further we've gotten into the series, it's been so hard because I read this, I'm like, this is gonna be my favorite. But then I read the next 2.5 books, and I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't know anymore. I just don't know which individual books. But there's so much here, and it's very aptly named with Peril's Gate, and we're looking at the potential of like all hell breaking loose and everything worst case scenario in a lot of ways, and just kind of seeing that and seeing everyone trying to figure out where to get things going in the right direction, and just also seeing so many events here that are this close to having a vastly different impact, and that could have made things go an incredibly different way, and the impacts that those have. So it's so much going on in this book. With you got the action and the other things, but it's very much the very character focused parts toward the ending that were definitely my favorite part of the book, which I'm guessing I'm not alone with. Uh, I didn't think so.
No, this is a book where I remember when first speaking to Blaze about the series, and Blaze has read the entirety of the series now, published books, and etc. And now I've read the entirety of the published books, and I think what this book does is it is definitely, for me, it's like this book gives you, when I think about the series, this book will give me perspective down the road, I think, because having read as far ahead as I have, I look back to this book as a jumping off point, definitely. So, when I think it was Nico, if he said pivotal, yeah, and this book, this is the first book where, yes, in the previous books, I agree, but this book where I literally was reading it, and I almost felt like in my head I could see Janny just cackling just evilly about what she's doing to us emotionally, because I mean this book was just a roller coaster ride of emotions. Like I mean, it's like you take the reader, you break them apart, and you put them back together again. That's how you feel when you read this book. And we get into the spoiler stuff. I can't wait to talk about it because some people really got ruined in this book. And there was so much of it. I think if you don't read ahead, and if you haven't read it, you look backwards, and it may seem somewhat normal in a way because Jenny does this. But when I realized what happened to some of the characters in this book, if you think about it, it was just some of the stuff was just horrific, right? Like shocking, thrilling, but just horrific. And this book, like I said, emotionally, your emotions, again, you said, it was just going like this all book long, to the point where when I finished the book, I had to literally just kind of like take a breath and go, oh, okay. So yeah, but it was phenomenal.
So me, first time reading Peril's Gate, as I mentioned before, this was like 2 years ago, devastating. I was reading in bed. I actually woke my wife up after that ending because it was just so shocking. Now, reading it for a second time, as Paul said, there are parts of this book that are devastating. And I didn't really, first time going through, I didn't pay attention to like the minor characters of what was happening. But now going back, reading it for the second time, I'm just even more devastated. And we'll get to more of that in the spoiler section. As Jenny says, this is truly the book where you realize you're not in Kansas anymore. And this is the jumping off point for the rest of the series. And there's a reason that Janny had to stop writing the series and take a break. She wrote to Ride Hell's Chasm for this. The parts of this book that really drew me in, especially the second time, was more on the relationship with Erethan and Alera. And also, we get more insight into the Ath Brotherhood, which I always wanted to know more about. I guess my brain just skipped over it kind of the first time reading through. But that was stuff that really came to mind for me. Spoiler-free version, of course.
Let me tell you, when people say you can tell a series from 50 pages into the first book, or if they haven't got it off the ground by the first book. This series really, as you said, noticed, Nico, you had to get to here before you could jump off, all of you. This book is the hinge of the series. I call it the initiation. If you think about that, so many fantasies have these characters acquire self-awareness and power, and they never go through the initiation of reckoning with their past. Their past never catches up to them. They do some nice little exercises and some sweet little meditations, and then they step off to having all this power without unloading the baggage. So this book is the initiation, both for the reader. It's going to initiate you for what is coming, where we truly break the envelope, and this fantasy goes where most fantasies never dare to tread. It also is an initiation point for many of the characters. So I won't get into spoiler territory there, but if you think about the number of characters who either fall back into their past or transcend their origins, transcend their baggage, transcend their woes, and step into something vastly bigger. And from that perspective that you gain by the characters having achieved that release, now you can truly understand the powers that are greater, that are in plain sight, but not obvious because your perspective point has not been stretched in the first numbers of volumes. So it's right there. When you read it again, you'll see it's right there, but you have to undergo the initiation, and that is Peril's Gate. It is that gateway. It is that crossing point. So if you think of it in those terms, it slides into place because the book itself takes place in under a year. It's one solid chase scene, right?
Yeah, I can't wait to get to spoiler territory because I feel like Janny, this was the first time that I really had to, my love of certain characters, and I'm not one of those people that I need to like the characters I read. I don't need to like, and maybe that makes me weird, but I know some people they want their heroes, the people that they love to be at the center of the book. They want to, they want to follow them on a certain path. But I don't mind reading a bunch of just flawed, messy, complicated characters that are messed up. But I do have my personal heroes and favorites in this book, and this book really challenged me because I had to deal with things like Jariet and Sulfin, and that I obviously can't get into it now, but butting up against my caring of both these characters on opposite sides and having to deal with what happened, that was really hard for me. Like when I got to certain points, we know what happens there. It was just, because again, you're caring and rooting for one character for certain reasons. You're caring and rooting for another character, and you know that there's going to come a point where not one of them isn't going to come out of it, right? And you just, those are the things that you did in this book that really pulled at my heartstrings. So.
Yeah, Janny said this thing about Arathon has to go through this so that he has to reconcile his past or the deeds of his past. I'm wondering what will happen to Lysair because he never did that. So what are the consequences? What is the cost that he will have to pay? And I hope he pays because there were so many instances in this book. I was like cringing at his behavior, especially when somebody makes an appearance. Again, this is kind of a spoiler, so I'll not say what exactly now. But I'm still wondering what is the cost he's going to pay.
Lysair has had 2 counts, actually 3, where he was offered that moment. He could have transcended. He could have stepped into and reconciled his past, and he turned them down every time. And an initiation of any kind is voluntary. You can walk away. You can reject it. You can paste it over with an excuse. You can whatever. So all the characters in this book, in Peril's Gate, face that moment.
Right. Any more spoiler-free thoughts? If not, we can jump into spoilers already.
Let's jump
Okay.
in.
Yeah, please, let's jump right into spoilers so we can talk about this properly.
Well, let me say
All right.
one more thing before we do spoilers.
Mhm.
When people rush through this series and they reach those final chapters, they often read them too fast. This is sort of bridging spoiler territory, actually. They read the final chapters, the sequence in the maze, too fast, and they say, oh, Wurts was just regurgitating the other books. And they miss the subtlety. They miss the fact that
Yeah.
this is the character facing what actually happened, not the self-denial, not the effects of the curse, not the things that we blur out because we aren't focused in the right direction. So it is not at all a regurgitation. What you're seeing is the impact of Arathon's thinking unlocked. And going forward, it's going to profoundly change how he responds to everything. And it's going to profoundly change how you perceive his responses, because he is an initiate master. He gives away nothing. In this book, it's all laid bare. So you see him to the bottom in this book. And it had to be done in such a way that it seared it into your mind, because going forward, you need to know to the core what he stands for and carry that with you. Okay, spoilers. Go ahead, guys.
I want to talk quickly about Kevor. So that's one of the things that totally destroyed me in this book. But as well, I kept thinking, because Kevor shows glimpses of being potentially, he doesn't have the extended lifespan that his father does, but he shows a potential, especially with his mother's influence, of he could have been someone, had he been able to succeed Lysier, that had the potential to make things better. But of course, that's not his path. But I found I was very heartbroken that he wasn't going to have the chance to do that, for reasons other than what happens to him, because we know what it looks like on face, what happens to him. But I kept thinking that here's someone who is imbued with these gifts, the gifts of his line, but also he has a bit more of that empathy that Arathon has, and again, with his mother's influence, I feel he could have been, he could have changed things, and then of course Janny just crushes us.
No, he had too many enemies. He had too many enemies, exactly for what he was. Exactly for what he was. Look at the people who protect corruption in our world today. They can't let something that gifted rise, and they'll nail it if they can stop it before it ever hatches out of the egg. So yeah, he's the unrealized potential, but he transcends that.
Yes, he does. He does. But that was heartbreaking, and I don't know if this is something else that I don't know if people focused on as much with there was so much that went on. That's probably part of the reason why a lot of people may have missed certain things, because there was just so much going on in this book. Like, I don't know if a lot of people were focused on Aethiel, the sword, Erathon's sword, and what the turn things took with what that sword really is about and what it means. That's another aspect that, like I said, I don't want to monopolize the time here, that hopefully we can get to touch on later. And
well, that's actually Praetor's not when you find that out.
Yeah, but I mean, this is when I first got an inkling that it was more than just what you had portrayed, right? This is the first time I start to latch on to that, and I think we were on DMs, and I started talking with that. I was like, before I'd read the next book, I was like, there's something more, right? And that anyways, I don't want to beat that to death, but and again, the Arathon does something near the beginning of the book when he duels Theon, and I'm like, I kept thinking like, oh man, now you got yourself hurt, and like, over it, almost like something that didn't need to happen. It was unnecessary. But then I went back and I started looking at it, and it it was a lesson for Theon, right? And his character arc, and obviously I've read all the way through. Like, now I can look back at his character arc and see what Erathon was trying to do.
He had a promise. That was the promise he made to Theon to get him out of the city and Grand Conspiracy without fighting.
Yeah.
When we reach safe ground, you can have it out.
Yeah, and as soon as they reach safe ground, he has it up. And
forces the issue way too soon, and it went wrong. You're right. He was trying to teach him a lesson, and it went wrong.
But at the same time, it wasn't a totally fruitless exercise, right? Even though it hurts Erathon and handicaps him, he goes through so much. He's wounded, and that wound really affected him and his capabilities throughout the book. But I kept thinking, but what about Theon? What did that do for Theon? Right. And then when I read forward and then I looked backwards at character, you know what? That was an important moment for him, right? Because so much of his personality was questioning and not understanding about what real duty was. He understands it later and he acts on it. But I think that it was like, oh man, Erathon hurt just doing this useless kid, and why do you do that, and blah blah. Like, that was just so impetuous. But then when I look back, it was a lesson taught. So and those are the masterful things you do, Janny, with characters like this. So I thought that was really
He's
phenomenal.
A teenager. What teenager's really going to own up?
Yeah.
They don't know everything, and people forget that because the rest of the characters surrounding him are so mature. He's a teenager.
But he's also obstinate, and he's also just obdurate. He's just like rock, and he will not budge.
He was told he was special from birth, and he sits on it.
Yes, exactly.
He sits on the disappointment that no, he wasn't that special. So yeah, he's a teenager.
Yeah. But great. I love that. Anyway, so I want to give people a chance to speak. So.
Yeah, but it also shows how much, what is it called? False campaign, or like how much it can brainwash you. It happens in politics also, right? Like, we see people so obsessively following something, like some ideology, like let it be religion or politics or whatever, but it can really skew your view, because even though Theon was not a bad child, he's not, but still, after meeting Erathon and not having got bad experience from him directly, he still refuses to believe him, right? He refuses to understand what he's seeing with his own eyes, but believe in all the hearsay and all the propaganda against Erathon, right? And it's not just with him, but it's with everybody who is around Lysair. This happens, and that's where I wanted to talk about Sulfin. I was about to think that, okay, he is going to have a change of heart, maybe because he tried to keep Jiret alive, right? And not alive, to give him medication for his pain and all that. So I was like, okay, maybe he is doubting Lysair now, but no, he's back to his former zealous self in like 5 chapters or something. So so I think they're all so driven. Even the army that is chasing Erathon across, they are so relentless. So they are so brainwashed, basically. It's like somebody pulling them by threads or ropes. It felt like that. Nothing can stop them.
You guys who've read on are all doing this, right?
Very, very good insight. Yeah, 100%. And what kind of we almost brushed on this, and then you kind of transitioned into it, because one of the most surprising things for me in this book, with how much I enjoyed it, was the scene closer. Well, it was a bit before the end, but with Lysair and Sulfin after Jiret has been caught, and everything's going on. And he basically is able to call out to the spirit of a Paravian, and that whole showdown with Lysair And I mean, I have been Team Arathon since the Mist Wraith. You know, I've been Team Arathon the whole time. I'm like, screw Lysair, you know. But that moment was just so good, and because it wasn't just like the Paravians coming and he's just like, no, go away. Like we see the impact that just the shade of a Paravian is having on everything and everyone around here. People are falling like over, they can't even deal with it. It's this just like an unbelievable experience. He stares him down, and then it's not even that he's just determined not to listen or not to, you know, give up what he's been doing, but it's the fact that he even kind of says something to the effect of like, but what if you're wrong? What if I'm right? How could I ever forgive myself, or like how could I ever cope with it if I don't do what I think I need to do? And yeah, I'll let you go ahead there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Nico, I got the exact opposite reaction. If I had a sword, I would have, slashed him to pieces, because I hated Lysair so much in that moment. Like, this is this otherworldly being which everybody reveres and has so much power, but he is so arrogant that, like, okay, if I'm not there, who will save the world? Somebody else will come, right? Like, I mean, he is so full of himself. He's like, he is the only one who can save the world. That just pisses me off every time he says that. I'm like, I'm being emotional now because I hated Lysair in so many moments in this book, and this was one of that moment I was mentioning earlier in the spoiler-free section, where the what was his name? Was it Isamon, the Paravian that visited them?
It was either
Sorry.
Darian or his brother.
Okay, sorry, I forgot, but that was such a profound moment. Like Nico said, you can feel the effect he's having on everybody, like humans, and I love that scene. I didn't expect that to happen, and in fact, I didn't realize until later, when Arathon is reliving the experience. That's when I realized that he was summoned or called by Jared. I didn't realize it at that point. Maybe I missed while I was reading, but it was so incredible that Jared could do that. He had that sense to do that, but then even that could not change Lysair a bit.
Lysair, I mean, Jared became one with the land, and that particular Paravian spirit had been the guardian, the centaur guardian of that region. So he called that shade forward. So that was definitely Jared's doing. And you realize that the two characters who don't lose it when they face that were the descendants of the High Kings. So Lysair, there's a reason he's not brought to his knees. These guys, their lineage was bred to do the liaison face to face between mankind and the Paravians to negotiate things. So Lysair had that strength. Arathon had that strength, even though he was on his knees. So that I'm showing you a little open pane into history there. He wasn't only just being stubborn, but yes, he was Lysair, or adhering to what he truly thought he had to do. His self-righteousness was stronger than anything in that point. He was also bred to do that job.
And what's it?
Yeah. What?
No, sorry. I was going to say, and once again, Janny takes her heart and rips it out with Jared, and we see the sacrifice and what the stewards of the High Kings, what they're capable of in terms of ensuring, again, not only testing the worthiness of the High Kings, but sacrificing themselves, others, to ensure that the protection of the land and the lineage of the High Kings. And one thing I kept thinking, as much as someone like Jared, you weep for him, Janny gives us this beautiful, this absolutely poignant and heart-wrenching, but beautiful catharsis in that he's happy with his decision. He's happy with what's happened. He wants Arathon to go on and thrive. He would make the sacrifice all over again of his own life. It's such a beautiful, I mean, if it doesn't bring tears to your eyes when Jarrett and Kars are the one that their conversation, I don't know what will. But yeah, like you this is the theme. One of the themes I've hooked on to now is the cat the Dians, forgive my pronunciation, Janny. You can correct me again, but what they are, what they mean to the entire story, but certainly to the land and the humans and the preservation of the High King, their lineage, and what they're willing to do. It's just phenomenal. So
It's the linchpin of Arathon's redemption. When the centaur points out he gave his life for love. And if you reject that and go back into self-punishment, you negate everything that it was done for. So that spirit was the linchpin of everything that happened in that section. And there will be more carrying on from that going forward. I should probably add, somebody was mentioning that so much happens in this volume. I deliberately had to slow the style down even more for Peril's Gate because of the number of layers and levels that had to be actively established and held together. After Peril's Gate, I don't have to do that anymore. So I actually leaned the style down quite a lot because now everything that you know is implied in the further volumes. So Peril's Gate was written at a slower geared language pace than the others because there were so many balls in the air. So readers need to think about that you can't rush this volume because, yeah, everything is packed in because this is the jumping off point where we break the envelope. Totally, completely break the envelope. I could not do that prior to this. So I know this isn't the pattern for big series that you have to get to a certain point before the doors really fling wide, but that's the case for this one. It's a real long form work.
Just to touch on a couple points, some of which have already been mentioned. I know one particular I want to go into first. Kavor, I was really, really sad with what happened to him, but then, as Jenny said, he does transcend. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe he's the first new initiate in like 100 years. So we get a new perspective into that that part of the world, which I also very much enjoyed reading. Next, Jarrett. His sacrifice crushed me the second time even harder because I see the overall ramifications of what that means. Him calling forth the centaur spirit through his mage talent, which eventually helps Arathon in the maze. Lysair rejecting it. And Jenny, you're right. It looks like the third time that he rejected being quote unquote saved. Well, that goes back to the themes of free will. His free will not. He has it in his mind that what he's doing is so right, and that justice needs to be served. That anyone willing to try to change that inflicts on his right to free will, and so he won't have it. And that's a theme that follows the rest of the series, as we all know. And then with Jarrett, just closing out that part, when I forget if it's his spirit or his daughter dreams it, but she comes to her saying, "You are now the Cathian." That just completely blew me away, shocked, and so hurtful at what she has to endure now. This young girl, and the burden on her shoulders for what the Cathian needs to do. That just really got to me. And the final point I wanted to talk about, which we haven't talked about yet, is the new Prime facility and her involvement in what's going on. So early in the book, Lorenda and Alera go to meet the new Prime. And she says that we no longer want to destroy Arathon. We want to capture him, but leave him alive for other intentions. So it's a complete change from what we've been reading up to this point on what Moriel wanted to do. But now we see like a little bit of a turn of the page, and we're not really sure at first why is that. And then one step further on that is Alera. She sees what well, first off, the Prime swears on the Waystone that she will not use Alera, and correct me if I'm forgetting the language. She will not use Alera's powers or Waystone to corrupt or capture Arathon, or go against Arathon, go against her love for Arathon, and something along those lines. That is powerful in itself. But then Alera, she tries to cleanse her crystal, and essentially, because she knows what the Coriani can do with that, and she tries to destroy it and essentially destroy herself. But a member of the Ath Brotherhood stops her, and then she goes on to one of the Whiteholds and meets Davian, and that whole scene, and that it just builds one on top of the other. But those important scenes to me, I just wanted to mention, and I'm sure when you guys think back to it, you realize like how much those like little things will play down the road.
I have a question now because you mentioned Davian. So there is this eagle, right? Okay, maybe this is a dumb question, but I was thinking it was from one of the sorcerers. But then this clan scout, who is one of the clan scout who is accompanying Arathon, says that that's my eagle. So I got so totally confused. Whose eagle is that, and who is that? I'm so confused.
It's Davian, yeah.
It's Davian.
Davian, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's Davian.
So, but then why did the clan scout say that? That's me, or did I read it wrongly? Because I was so taken aback by that. Or maybe I'm so stupid.
Let me see if I can find the line. But yeah, the Davian is shape changing, and he's doing it in the flesh, and he's doing it everywhere. And you'll find out. I mean, there's so many little things in this book that are going to bear all the way to the final volume. Lots of little details that come up in this book. And while I'm searching that page to find out what threw you off on the eagle, think about the ennobilization of Lysair's cause, because he does a sacrifice himself. He ennobilizes what he's doing, and yeah, it's a lie. But he says, I'm willing to be wrong in case I'm right.
Mm-hmm.
So he rejects Kadarian, he rejects the centaur, but his reasoning is, if I'm wrong, humanity goes down because I'm their last hope. So I will risk being wrong in case I'm right. So there is that spark of a noble cause underneath of all that. He ennobilizes what he's doing, but he also is willing to pay the final price. If you read that scene carefully.
Well, yeah. And
if you're not too busy hating him, you'll see that there's a human facet beneath all of that.
But now he's using blood magic and blood rituals, though, now to do that.
Well,
and
don't get ahead of yourself. But yeah, that emerges in this book, and it's
that emerges. It comes out in this book, so yeah, I think it's not spoiler ahead.
Most
it's not spoiling ahead.
Over it, but it definitely emerges.
And Angie, one thing about the Davian and the eagle, when Davian and Alera are in the Ath Brotherhood, I forget the term for it, but let's call it the home. She goes he gives eagle eye view of what's going on in the outside world with I think Arathon when he's captured. Not Arathon, Jarrett when he's captured, and Alera is seeing that with Davian. So that's giving her the eagle eye view. So it 100% is Davian, and he has the ability to take Alera with her, on these visions with that stuff.
Yeah. While Janny is searching for that, just another point that I noted, that throughout this book series, and especially in this book, we really feel this importance that was given towards the animal world and the environment, our world basically, including inanimate objects, and how much respect the sorcerers and the brotherhood, the adepts, and all they give towards our world, even including the inanimate objects, the horses and the dogs, everything. Even when they are killing out of mercy, they ask for forgiveness. And it's such a noble thing to take away. I feel, because I'm a huge animal lover and environmentalist, and that triggered the environmentalist in me. Like, oh yeah, this is such a nice thing, and it is pervasive. It is throughout the book, but I think it was much more evident and prominent in this book, right? Like, because every um, every time a horse is killed for mercy, like, they have fallen down and broken the ankle or something, then he has to kill and he asks forgiveness. And same thing with, I think, the hunting dogs, I think. So I felt deeply touched by that.
Yeah, it's
There's
a
so much.
It's
Yeah.
so
Go ahead.
different because you don't see that normally in fantasy, because you have to fight whatever monster, and it's not like that, right? It's not good against a monster, but you're giving respect, like Janny said, always this perspective of Lysair. Even though I hate him, but we are also sometimes forced to take his perspective unknowingly, right? So it's sometimes we can't just point out who is exactly wrong, and I think that's why the people in the world are so confused and so easily easily led astray, and easily believe Lysair, because every sentence somebody saying that maybe, what, Arathon is like this, and Lysair just shuts them down, like, with his uh, I don't know, he has such a sweet mouth that he can actually sweet talk people and manipulate them. Arathon is very weak in that. Uh, I think in that aspect, I think he cannot manipulate people that easily. But I think sometimes, is Lysair really believing he's saying that, or he's just using words to manipulate people to his cause?
I think you get a little bit of both. But yeah, and it's like I said, I'm definitely with you. I'm not liking Lysair, but this book does, I feel like, go back and remind you that, hey, he's still a human. Like, he's a flawed human, but he's still there, because it was like the showdown there, even just like him talking with Soph and Evan after they captured Jira, and they're like all concerned that this guy is telling lies about you. He's saying the Shadow Master's your brother and all this kind of stuff. And he's like, oh yeah, I mean, most people don't know that, but it is. And then when they're talking too about, not he says something about how he's doing this all specifically to fight Shadow. And when he hears something about other people just want to destroy all of the Clanborn so that there's none left, he's like, well, no, I mean, I'm not doing that. I'm just fighting Shadow. And there's some of those things where it realizes, like, you start to see that this whole thing that he's kind of started has also maybe gotten a little out of control. And even he's probably, not entirely sure. But between his own personality, his innate trait of justice, and the Geese of the Mist Wraith, there are so many things all that just make it so difficult for him to not keep going down that path, even though it's gotten away from him. So I'm still, I'm not a Lysair fan, obviously, but this book kind of made me like, it kind of like put it in my face, like, yeah, you want to hate this guy? Look at this here, and you still can. But Janny's gonna make sure you know that, like, hey, he's still a human, and sometimes things are out of your control, even if you're that important.
And you also see when what happens to Kevor, and Lysair admits Angie to Sulfin how much he loved Kevor. And again, Lysair has this thing where anyone who he loves is a weakness to him. It's as much as he feels something for someone, he cannot, because that will interfere in his mind after Talith with his quest to bring down Arathon, and Arathon in his mind being the embodiment of evil. And again, as Nico pointed out, driven by the gaze and everything else. Like, I think, because I know Angie, I can tell you're so insightful with the things you're saying, but as well, I know you're someone who, as I talked about before, you like your heroes to be good, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think looking at Lysair, I'm not saying he's good, but he's complicated, right? And complicated, flawed people. It's not that Erathon isn't complicated, but Erathon's traits tend to ennoble him and make you gravitate towards. Lysair has traits that I think are also ennobling, but they're buried in layers of issues, right? So I would say that, and again, I haven't read the final book, but I think when you read through this series and you look back, especially in a reread, you might actually find knowing you, I think you might start to find more empathy and caring for Lysair, as much as the things he does seem abhorrent sometimes, that you kind of see, okay, you know what, maybe he's not quite as bad as I think he is. So, but that's just my opinion. I may be wrong.
Arc 4 opens up a bit more into Lysair, and so does Arc 5. So
the only thing I wanted. Sorry, go ahead, Janny.
No, that's all right.
The only thing I want to say about Lysair, without getting too far ahead, especially this cover more in the next couple books. You can see the people around Lysair, like kind of like not only propping him up to a level which he might not be able to like deliver, and they're taking care of stuff which he doesn't know about. He doesn't know the truth about Talith. He doesn't. He believes that she committed suicide. He doesn't know a lot of things that are going around him. So his focus is purely on Erathon. If he knew everything else going on around him, would he have the same mindset? Would he have the same emotional impact? Would he have the same goals if he had all the information? I don't know. Probably, maybe not. That's another aspect of Lysair that we need to understand. That it's not just black and white. He's doing evil things, but he's not 100%. I don't want to say in the right state of mind, but he has the blinders on. So that's something just to keep in mind.
I mean, even Arathon is doing evil things out of necessity. We could say the same thing for Lysair, because that might be his justification for his action. But my problem with Lysair is that he doesn't repent at all for all the lives lost. There is this one sentence, a conversation that he's having. He's like, send the people who are injured back, and we are marching forward. Doesn't matter. You have to fight, right? It was the end of a chapter, one of these chapters, and I'm like, you have to fight. You have to go on. He has no mercy for people who just died, unlike Arathon, and that's where my problem lies with him. And I mean, I'm sorry, I'm just hating on him a lot. Maybe we can move on to the next topic, because if I start talking about Lysair, I'll never stop.
I think I found your passage. I think it's the ending of the first subchapter of set 18, where it says, they felt like his murderers to send him to Kiwar. Yet worse, the unbearable mercy he asked if they insistently sheltered him, to grant him his crossing on the blade of a sword, trussed like a rabid animal. I'll call the eagle, blurted Huel, too miserable to extend the prongs of unbearable quandary. Then ride for your life, liege. Is that the moment where you thought it was his eagle?
Yes. I think before that, there is a sentence where he directly also says that the eagle is mine, or he answers to me, or something like that. He mentions to...
So it might be before that. But yeah, it's definitely Davien. Not, but they know that if they call that eagle, they're in cahoots with it. They know where they're sending Arathon. They know.
Okay, it's coming back now. I know what you're talking about. I think because of the fact that Davion told him that he would lead them there. So I think that's what they were saying. It's just basically, it's not. They know it's not just an eagle. They know it's leading them where they need to go to get to the maze.
If they call it back, yes, it will lead him, and that's where it will take him.
Yeah,
where his most celebrated ancestor died. If you cross that dread threshold, may our Creator stand at your shoulder with every bright power of guidance, because he'd be pretty much going to his ancestor's fate.
But what a character Davian is, and like I love characters like that. Those wild
Yeah.
cards that are just
Yeah.
like unpredictable. You don't really know what their agenda is. After reading the shorts that Janny sent me and seeing more of Davian and more about his moral standpoint on certain things, what he's willing to do, what his, I love Davian. He has become one of my favorite characters in the entire series. And someone who, intellectually, certainly he is a match for anyone, but also you just love those mavericks that just think outside the box and aren't going to necessarily conform with, like, okay, you think I should be doing this, but you never considered this, and this is why you're a fool for doing this. And he's that guy, and I absolutely love his character. And did anyone catch, and it's something that I even missed until I did a slight reread of the book. I mean, I caught it, but it never really sunk in that, as powerful as, like, we have to realize the Fellowship sorcerers have, their power is unmatched by most entities in this world. But did anyone stop and think for a minute that Erathon basically remade, like, basically took Davian's power and just kind of chucked it for a second? Like, that's how powerful Erathon is. Like, it didn't sink in until I did a bit of a reread. It's like, wait a minute, like, this is Davian's magic, and Erathon just, boom. And obviously Erathon is still, his powers are burgeoning. He's still understanding how to use his powers. But I keep thinking, and I can't spoil anything reading ahead. Erathon continues to evolve in his powers, and I feel like, from what I've read about the High King before, he's going to exceed his predecessors in terms of what they can do, because he has this master bard talent and everything else. That's one in, but not just that. It's not just that he's a master sorcerer. It's not just he's a master bard. There's something about him that's beyond, because you don't just take a Fellowship sorcerer's magic and just go, okay. Not that he did it easy. I'm just saying, like, that isn't something you would expect out of someone, and he's able to do that. So that's giving me a hint of just how powerful. You see a lot more of it later on, but wow, like, that was the first one when I went, I knew I thought was powerful, but wait a minute, hold on a second. And when I went back to reread, it's like, okay, I'm on notice now, that Erathon is capable of
Did
some
you catch
incredible
the
things.
key to that?
I'm sorry, Jenny?
The key to that break in Davian's ultimate box, with that black box with that maze, there were two keys that broke that power that Erathon accessed. One was his love for Alara, and the other was the centaur. Jirit and the centaur. So think about that, because those little details are going to matter. But yes, you're right. And there's a reason. I mean, I'm not going to say anything, because the later books will open up exactly what was going on with Davian too, and what his purpose was. So there's so much more coming. But yeah, you're going to step off from this book, and you're not in Kansas anymore, and you become initiate to the awareness of what that owning that kind of power requires. And so it's going to enable you to read passages that you wouldn't have read in the same way before. When you see the latter half of the series, it will give you a platform of understanding and awareness. And think about it. I couldn't have done this scene in book one, because you did not have the investment in the world or the characters or the worldviews or the factions involved. You didn't have the depth of feeling for that to carry this scene. It would have read like a comedy. You would have burst out laughing 10 minutes into the hard parts, because it would have been ridiculous. But by taking that journey 5 volumes prior, now you're invested that you can understand the point of view.
Yeah, and you know what? It's funny how, and this is obviously a book where Erathon actually receives, as Angie and Blaze aptly pointed out, absolution from and that was also another pivotal point that perhaps maybe got missed and everything, that this he accepts absolution from the centaur, and that in itself, like, think about it. Ever since Erathon started on this quest to find the Paravians, with every book we see a bit more and a bit more and a bit more, even if it's a shade or an impression or an image of the Paravians. So obviously, in some ways, he's been successful, right? In that now he's opened up, and we see it first in that one scene in jail, when he actually, his music, when he's like, ever since he started on this quest, we see more and more and more of the Paravians. So obviously something is coming, right? I've gotten to the second last book, and I can't talk about what I've seen up to that point that happens after. You guys are going to be blown away that haven't read it. And Blaze is just laughing, obviously smiling because he has, and I haven't. And I'm like, I haven't read the final book, but you'll notice that Erathon's connection seems to be, I'll just say it as a point. It seems to be enhancing and bringing back more of the Paravians. And remember, that was his mission, right? So
yeah,
it's something to watch.
Speaking of the Paravians, it's not just Erathon who can access the Paravians. If you remember, when Alara was in the Ath Brotherhood, she calls forth a Paravian, the unicorn, and one of the brothers was shocked because that hasn't happened in, I forget how long, but like hundreds of years, and that
thousands
of years, and
hundreds, thousands.
That's one more connection that Erathon and Alara have. So they've been blessed with the sight of the Paravians. And going back to Davian, one of my favorite scenes in this book, it actually made me laugh the second time reading it, was when Davian and Alara, they made like a deal or a compact, and the Prime notices this, and that she can trap Davian with her powers, and it completely backfires, and she burns her hand.
Right.
That shows you, one, how ambitious the Coriani are, and two, how powerful Davian and the Fellowship really, really, really are. That made me laugh. And just one final one. Paul, you mentioned that Davian is probably your favorite member of the Fellowship. He's probably my third. My favorite one is still Seth here, because we don't see him that much, but we know what he's doing to prevent the Aethera from dissolving into chaos. He's holding the lanes in place. He's almost in a comatose state, only comes up for brief moments before he has to go back to his subconscious and unconscious to mend the broken lanes of the world by the Grand Conspiracy in book 5. So that, even though we're talking about like the sacrifices of Jarrett and everything, which is horrifying, this is the undertone of the sacrifice of what's going on behind the scenes that I, on the reread, learned to say, like, wow, what he's actually doing, it's not going to jump at you at the page. It's meant to be subtle, but that subtlety, it is like the thread can barely be put through the eye of the needle. Like, that's how like tight everything is. I just love that part.
Yeah, I was trying to remember if the Alara thing was this book or not. So thanks for bringing that up, because I was going to bring that up, but I'm like, shoot, was that this one or was that the next one? And so I was like, just to be safe, I will.
Yeah, I mean everything about Fellowship for Sorcerer, I love. I love the banter between Carrotmon and Luhane. I don't know how much of it is fun and how much of it is like really serious. Do they really dislike each other, or is it just fun banter? And also the how Carrotmon treats Dakar and even Fionn. That was kind of like a fun side in between such intense world-changing, world-altering moments. He still had this light sense of humor, I think. So, yeah, the sorcerers are really, really amazing, and I'm sure with each book we are learning more and more about them, I think.
One thing I loved about this book too is that, in terms of Erathon, I know Erathon for you, Angie, that's your favorite character, and of course I can understand why. You know, everybody keeps writing him off, right? You know, Mortal Prime says, nah, there's no way he's surviving. If Lyser's like, but Lyser is cracked enough, smart enough to go, well, if he survived, if him and Davian have paired up, then look out for us, right? We better be careful. But he's written off initially that he's not there. There's no way he's going to survive this trial, and he does. So and as again, having read forward, Erathon, if he's the crux of everything, I still have to see how it plays out. But definitely, this is no longer, for me, the Erathon versus Lysier, book. Series. Whereas there was a point in this series where for me it's very much the Erathon versus, yes, everyone else around him and everything else around them. And as Blaze said, the bigger the world, the universe stage with the Fellowship, but it was very much, Erathon versus Lysier when he broke it down to brass tacks. But this book, I felt that just for me personally, I'm not saying that was the way Janny wrote it, but there was a shift for me that Erathon became the heart of the series, the essence and the embodiment of the series. This for me was the book that he took over in my mind. Not that Lyser isn't important and that everything Lyser's doing is important, because it is. And the more you read forward, the more, in some ways, it becomes. But Erathon, this is where he took on a new meaning for me within the context of this series, and it wasn't because of just because of what he achieved. It was because of, I think, what he means to, in terms of the land. The power he's exhibiting. He's, like I said, he's growing more and more and more into his powers, his capabilities. He has more self-awareness. He's understanding what he's capable of. And he was always a man that was always willing to sacrifice himself. And if necessary, sacrifice other people. And in that way, he's the same as Lysier in my mind. But now I think he's really there. There's this, I think he's starting to understand that, there's so much more going on beyond this struggle of himself and Lysier, and some things he's done in the pursuit of trying to save the world, i.e. bring back the Paravians because he feels that they're the ones that can truly stop this conflict. He's really he's gaining an awareness that transcends this, in some ways, it's the micro conflict between Lysier and Erathon. In some way, it's really the macro conflict, because they're the center of everything. Because don't think that someone like the Fellowship is going to care about these two mortals unless everything hinges on them, right? That the Fellowship are too important and they have too much crap going on to worry about these two dudes, unless, as was said, that word pivotal that I think Nico mentioned, like, unless they're pivotal. But yeah, Erathon is starting to show that, he's a talisman. That's the best way I can describe it. He's much more than just who he seems to be on face. So
I've always said Arc 3 raises it to worldview, and that's exactly what you're seeing. That is exactly what you're seeing. And if you think of Arc 4 staging for the mysteries, staging for Arc 5, is going to blow the lid off. So you'll have a lot of fun going forward.
I don't know if I can handle it. I'm still recovering from Initiate's trial. I'm still I want to say quickly, so I give people a chance to speak. I think now that it's the best book for me of a fantastic series. But it's funny, I will say this. I'm not getting too ahead. At first, Initiate's trial threw me the hell off. I was like, what's happened here, right? Like, what has Janny done here? And I ended up loving it, and of course being completely ruined. But now I'm looking back. Right now, it's funny. Initiate's trial is probably maybe my favorite book, this is close, but this is the book. Yeah, this is the book that made me go, oh my God, like I can never turn back from this series. I have to reread it 3, 4, 5 times to get the feeling I had when I read this book, this particular book. Because the feeling I had when I read this particular book is that, I used to sit down and go, wow. I remember reading Lord of the Rings and thinking, nothing else can ever be better than this in fantasy. I remember being very young and reading Lord of the Rings and thinking, there's nothing out there that I'm ever going to read. I don't know how old I was, probably in my teens, that's ever going to, well, Janny's topped that, blown that away, blown that out of the water. And this is that book, I think, that, if I needed more evidence to say, yep, without question, and I'm not denigrating Tolkien here. I'm just saying that's how good Janny is. This was the book that you go, yeah, this is masterclass. So,
if you think about it, you experience this book. You experience up to this book. You're not told the importance of everything. You discover it. And that's a difference between many of the major epics that are out there. You're told right from square one often what is important. You're told right from square one. You're given, this is the big philosophy, or characters are having discussions about the big philosophy. In this book, you encounter it because you live it. And it's a bit more subtle. And I think sometimes that gets assumed or missed. The word on the latter half of this series is very thin on the ground because people can't talk about it without spoiling, but also a lot of readers drop off because they miss the subtleties or they don't expect the huge expansion that's going to happen post Peril's Gate, or even after Arc 3, the huge expansion that's going to happen. So watching this discovery unfold in these live streams is of immeasurable value because it will get the word out there that is how this book works. This is what it does over and over again. This is what it does.
Yeah. And Arathon being very sly, there is this one sentence, let me check the name of the chapter here. Hunted. And he says, go. He frees the gray horse that he was riding on, and then tells him, go find a wild mare. He enjoined the dazed horse. Perhaps knowing Elera's presence stood by him, he loosed a lamed gasp of laughter. I'd do as much if I had your freedom. So he's indirectly hitting on her. Like, that was a fun but in-depth moment. Like, he has the sense maybe she's able to watch him or he's watching him. So just a fun moment, but it was so subtle. But if you're really into the book, you will pick that up. Like, he's trying to really maybe pass a message on to her that, you're okay, I value you still. It was really, and also during the reliving, we get to see Arathon's childhood and why, and that's where I felt a little bit sympathetic towards Lysair, because he hasn't had that kind of disciplined training to control his power. And even in the book it says, because Lysair is raw power that he's just using without any guidance, but Arathon is more controlled and he knows what he's doing. That's because of his training, and you get to see that in those chapters where his grandfather is taking real care. So even he's telling his tutor that, not to appreciate him or, tell him that he's good, because that will affect the way he perceives things. And that was so insightful, and also it made sense why Lysair is the way he is, and Arathon. So that's one point where I can feel a little bit sympathetic towards Lysair.
That's an excellent point, Angie, because in that when he's in the maze, in that those passages where you see Arathon's upbringing, he had to be disciplined and restrained with women, like his upbringing allowed him, as you said, that's a very, very astute point, that allowed him the control and the discipline, and he could channel back into that, in his adulthood with the things he's going to be facing, right? And his training as a sorcerer, right? And he grew up in a family that was that was practice, right? Sorcery was part of the practice. So I also think too that Lysier, it's I remember reading back in Curse and thinking that there's some parallels between my main character in my books, Othrin and Lysier, in that when you don't feel completely loved, completely supported, when you're told how to do things rather than shown, when you don't necessarily, when you're bred for leadership and you're bred to take over, but you don't understand what that really means. People are just preparing you for the thing, but not really showing you what it really means. That's a liability for Lysier, right? That when it comes to leadership, and as charismatic as he is, and as smart as he is, and as cunning as he is, and he can charm the birds out of the trees, and he has this natural trait of justice that is honed into him. That's part of his makeup. That is genetically bequeathed to him. He still doesn't really understand how to be the kind of ruler that he should be. He really wasn't shown how to do that, right? He's relying on so much, right, that has nothing to do with, and he, Arathon has embraced his heritage. Arathon has embraced the legacy of his particular High King lineage, right? But Lysier just lays claim to it, right, as if it's his, but he doesn't necessarily understand what that means. Arathon does the research, puts in the hard work, and is willing to be mentored and told by the Fellowship, who are the caretakers essentially of that knowledge of this is how you be a High King, right? Lysier's rejected the Fellowship, right? He's rejected them.
There's a key thing though, and Angie put her finger on it in Arathon's training, where the grandfather says, "Do not praise my grandson. Do not let him know he's precocious. Do not, because if you do, you will skew his perception and he will change what he's doing to achieve praise." Think about the insidiousness of social media and the like button.
Yeah.
It changes what you do. It changes what you think. It addicts you to something that does not true your compass in any way. That's why I admire some of Blaze and Nico pursuing and Paul writing a book that isn't following the beaten. That addiction is affecting our society as a whole massively, the machine of social media. And it is a quicksand for destroying critical thinking, destroying individuality, and destroying your original compass for knowing what you really like or don't like of your own self.
That's an excellent point, Janny. And it creates
woven in that in order to succeed to your true power, you have to discouple that, disconnect from it. And a lot of people read right through that and miss it. So
you're right. And
sharp eyes.
it was great, Angie. And what it does is it creates avatars, right? It creates avatars, and that is what we do in society. Yeah, we've created, and it's no disrespect to people who are popular. It creates Taylor Swift, right? Like it creates, someone who is about, we can, the platform we raise people to, the platform that Lysier is raised to in the eyes of others. When it's all about praise, as Jenny said, it's all about this concept of, you turn someone into this, you idolize this person and you turn them in, and who could resist the lure of someone saying you're basically a god, right? Like eventually, if enough people keep saying it, you're going to start, well, maybe I am kind of like that. Even if you don't want to admit it to yourself, even if you kind of in a way deny it, there's some self-denial there. Subconsciously, you're going to, well, yeah, I am, like I am kind of, like a god. Like, and those are some of the influences, I think. The difference between Lysier and Arathon is that, Arathon is all about self-discovery. He's all about looking internally and trying to, but Lysier's journey, so much of it is because of what other people, as Jenny said, are doing to prop him up as this thing, right? You think of the handlers around the celebrity, the handlers, what they do to create their image.
You ever hung out with real live celebrities even for 5 minutes? I mean, I played pipes for the Dragon Con parade for years and years and years until the pandemic kind of put a quit to it. And every parade, I would be in a limousine going to the head of the parade with me and my bagpipes. I'm a nobody, right? To these people, I'm a nobody. I would be in a limousine with some celebrities, and I would see them gathering up to the parade, and I would see them complaining, and I would see them. Some of them, there were two kinds, and one group was the vastly bigger one where they were so famous, everybody yesed and kowtowed to them. And it went to their heads, and they absolutely believed that they were that superior to everyone, and they behaved that way. And I saw them be unbelievably rude to people, just shockingly rude to the convention staff, to the entire thing. And then there were the ones who kept their humanity, realized I have a talent, but that doesn't make me an idol and put me up on the pedestal. So yeah, when you're surrounded with people that only yes man you and never tell you you're wrong and don't dare cross you, don't dare criticize you, it alters who you are. Now that's the extreme end of it. But if you think about the hero worship that we award some of our idols, some of them keep their individuality, and some of them, especially in the middle areas, you know, of the fame of the internet, the influencers, they're going to realize I don't get as much response from something that's unknown as I do from something that's ultra popular. So it alters their behavior. And you see that. So, you know, thinking about, and it's hard to hold the line. It's hard to maintain. So in a way, I'm glad that I wrote this series without all that adulation following me behind, because it didn't distort what I was trying to do. I stuck.
Right. And to add to that point, like, I don't know how much you know, but in India, movies are like huge. Like, movies are people's life, basically. And especially in South India, we have this state called Tamil Nadu. I don't know if you heard about that. So there, the worshipping of movie actors is like literal. They have temples built in the name of, like, real temples built in the name of actors and actresses, even female actors also. Like, they have temples built for them, and then they just follow them that blindly. And because of that, some of them end up entering politics, and they become politicians, and then they win, win elections, and they get parliament seats and things like that. So I can totally understand it. And like, I have heard from my friends who are in the movie industry that how they are treated and how they treat people around them. They have this entourage, they call, like, a group of 10 people always around them wherever they go, even if they don't need 10 people around them. They just want to show the power. Like, the more people around them, more popular, more powerful they are. And they are so extremely arrogant, but not all, of course. But yeah, I can totally understand that. And it's extreme, like, compared to Hollywood. I mean, Hollywood is cute in front of what's happening in India, I think. And it frustrates me. Yeah.
I think it's keeping in mind too with all that, and really good points about the difference too. But it's you do have, both of those individuals. They have very different forces against them, but they also do have some of the same thing too. And Arathon, like was brought up, he received training, and he has a lot more discipline, and that affects him in his ability for, like, his magic, obviously, and we see that right away where he's mage trained, and so he has more control there, but also with, like, the keys of the mist wraith. It's still, we've seen him also go full blown nuts, but he's a little bit has a little bit of a better off time with it because of the fact that he's got more of the discipline and he can resist it a little bit more. And so it is, like, Sarah's not been put in a great situation, and there's a lot of things that kind of go to his detriment with it. But also, I mean, he wasn't really set up for success in the same way that Arathon was. And if you put if you swapped them, things would be different, but it'd be really interesting to see how different, or if some of the same things might end up happening too.
I think I can say
I think.
completion of
I
Janny's.
think it froze.
Yeah.
Okay, he froze. Okay.
Oh, sorry. Am I back?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry. Thanks. So for Peril's Gate, having read now the entirety of the published works in this series, you know, I think that this book really, if you can read this series and get to Peril's Gate, you will put this series up with
Yeah.
the Malazans and the
Mhm.
Wheels of Time. If you can get to Peril's Gate, and take Janny's brilliant prose aside, and take the characters, everything, you will go, you know what? This is a series that I will not be able to forget, right? And this leaves this is indelible in my brain. Like this book, I will never forget Peril's Gate. Like and because I think to put a series up there on your top list, there's a couple of books, especially if they're long series. I mean, this is probably the longest series I've ever read. You need that Hallmark book that really sets things just over the edge. And like I said, it's not that the other books weren't brilliant, because they were, and that those other books made me keep wanting to read to get to this point. This is the book that, even if the books after this book weren't for me as enjoyable, and they were, so don't get me wrong, this book was like, okay, somebody has to acknowledge that this series is just it's mind blowing. So that's what this book did for me. It's the standout book of a standout series, and I think you need that to rate your series as top. So thank you so much, Janny, for writing it, and Blaze for putting me on to this. To Janny and Janny's writing and who Janny is, because it's not just the series is great, the author is great too. Is a wonderful person and does so much for the community. And but
No
Peril's
pedestal,
Gate,
no pedestal. I'm just one of the guys, I'm just a reader.
You're making it hard, Janny.
I'm just a reader that said, you know what? I want to do more. I want to do more than this. I want to exceed this. And that's if I did my job, that's what's coming in the second half of the series, and that's what's going to slam you sideways in the finale.
Right.
If I did my job.
So
this
should
is the
I
only
start
series.
dismantling my temple in my backyard to?
No, I am coming to pay my respects. Right. This is the only series that I've read by Janny. So I've not read To Ride a Hell's Chasm and other books. So my question is, are the other books also in the similar tone in terms of language, or is it targeted only for this series, or is it this is for others, not Janny, but for Blaze and Nico and Paul, who have read other books of Janny?
Yeah, so I've read Cycle of Fire, which is actually that's how I discovered by pure accident Janny, because I found this old kind of a little bit beat up but decent condition bind up of Cycle of Fire trilogy in a used bookstore, and I saw the cover and I'm like, okay, this is cool, I'm picking this up. And then I started reading it, and then I don't even remember who it was, but somebody commented, "Oh my gosh, if you like this, definitely check out her Words of Light and Shadow. It's so good." And so I'm like, okay. So then I started being on the lookout for those. But Cycle of Fire is definitely written with a different style. The prose is still excellent, and there's definitely some really nice passages, but it is also not to the same degree as Words of Light and Shadow, where you can really feel the intentional way it's written the way that it is. So it's definitely I like, if you're doing it on like a curve, or or a graph or something, it's like Cycle of Fire, and then you kind of keep going up for kind of the elevated prose with Words of Light and Shadow. I haven't read the other stuff yet, although I have just about everything that Janny's ever written or written with anyone. So.
Right, because I remember Janny speaking about this in other live. I think it was in Philip's channel or their read along. I think so. That you wanted to keep this book or the language of this book timeless, right? Like classic. So, like you said in the beginning, like plopping on the chair. So you won't find words like that in here, right? Uh, so, what I wanted to ask is while you're writing, Johnny, do you make a conscious effort to make sure that okay, or is it just this natural way of writing? This is how what's come out of your mouth so magical,
The
or do
story,
you have a thesaurus?
the prose frames the story. So depending what story you're telling, the prose frames the story. So yeah, some of the works that are more linear or that are handle things in a different way or have Cycle of Fire has younger protagonists, the prose will be simpler. This is the deep end. This is where I was wanting to strike the chord and reach the deepest parts of human nature. The other books definitely have depths. I never write without depths, but the prose is going to suit the story. And at this point, I think Blaze has read the most of them. He hasn't read Cycle of Fire, and he hasn't read Sorcerer's Legacy, which is the simplest of all, but Blaze is probably in a better position to give you a progression.
So yes, so of the Janny's other works that I've read her two standalones. I've read Master of Storm Warden, or which is more
Right,
like it's more episodic in nature. It's
This would be
very
Master of White Storm.
sorry, Master of White Storm. Had my foot in my mouth, so to speak. It's more of an episodic story. It's a standalone. It's very much in the same style, and if you like John Gwen's writing, you'll really like that. It's a complete story, and then one step above that, which is kind of like the bridge between like Cycle of Fire and Storms of Wars of Light and Shadow, is To Right House Chasm. The standalone work. It's the prose and the style is like one step below Wars of Light and Shadow, but it's one complete story, and the depth in that book matches Wars of Light and Shadow, especially the two main characters. It deals with so many facets of politics, like ancient magic. I don't want to get into it, but read To Right House Chasm. You'll see like the progression from
In
that.
Sorcerer's Legacy, the other standalone is the beach read. It's the simplest of them all.
Well, To Rise
time to read them all.
Hell Chasm is my favorite fantasy book ever.
Oh wow!
And
Okay.
that is why
Period.
it's been you talking about it so much that has me like I was already gonna read it, and I've had a copy for a while, and now I have an even better copy. But I just like I was already gonna read it, but hearing you talk about that book has me really really excited. But I want to finish Wars of Light and Shadow first, and then go back. When I'm like, okay, now I need more of Janny, and then I'll read the other stuff, waiting for the last book. So.
Yeah, I don't know if you. Sorry, Angie, go ahead.
No. The reason why I asked about the language is because I think the story is excellent, the character depth, and everything is amazing. I'm sure it's unparalleled, and it asks these deep philosophical questions, like I said, about environment and how we treat others, even inanimate objects and animals and all that. And then your justice versus compassion and all that is there. But I think what really sets this book series apart is the language. That's at least what I felt, and I love a very well written book because while growing up I wasn't exposed to fantasy or anything. So mostly in India, while you're learning, you learn Shakespeare, or that's what you read when you're studying and for your lessons, etc. So that's it. And I studied in a convent, so our sisters were like really specific about what kind of books we read, and so that's the kind of books that I read. And later on, of course, I lost touch with reading for like 5-6 years. But then when I came back, I gravitated more towards like simple thrillers or all that thing. And then when I discovered fantasy, it was okay, going back to that world of elevated language. And then when I discovered Janny, it was altogether on another level. And that's why I wanted to ask Janny, like, if it was this conscious decision, but I understand that she wanted to make this timeless epic, right? So language plays a huge role, I think.
But also, the number of layers and levels that are being carried constantly on the page required that depth. And also, this book is the one where I threw out all the stops. I was not going to dumb it down for anybody or anything. I was going to absolutely take every subject in it and wring the last bit of perception that I could bring to it. So this is the book that I absolutely threw limits out the window and said, keep up if you can, because we need works that stretch like that. And it's hard to make them sell in enough numbers to be supported. But we need that. We need our Beavis and Butthead to laugh when we've had a stressful day. But we also need books that absolutely turn us inside out and make us reconceive the events of our lives in different ways. So Light and Shadows takes a lot of things that I hated about what's going on in our world and tore them to shreds and rebuilt them. I don't have answers for everything that are going on, but I built things into this world that I wish that we could see. So there's a lot of wish list in this book. There's also a lot of examination of how did we get here? What makes us do what we do? Why do we have a global societies that are warring with each other? And where does misunderstanding and beliefs and obsessions all into that? So this was the book where I threw out all the stops and said, I'm going to put everything in there. And the stop had to reflect that. So the other books, to varying degrees, are for a different sector of readership. And it hasn't helped me because you read one and then you try to read another, and it isn't, some readers can't go there. So I sort of don't do the same thing twice. But that also helps to, if there's a reader that's on the line and they don't know where to start them with one of the easier books. They're still going to get the signature inability to predict the plot, and you're still going to have depth of character. You're still going to have many of the signature things that run through the bigger work. Just the language will be more acceptable and accessible for the modern mind, and it also will have a more linear progression of the plot. It won't require you revisiting what went before to understand it. This book requires you to have several layers of abstraction where you have to re-examine what you saw in book one or remember what you saw at the ground floor. The other books don't demand that, so that they're a little bit easier of a read.
It's also, Janny, this book is really so cinematic, really. Like if you like this book, Angie, talk about, I think you got me thinking about Bollywood. Like, so one of my favorite films, Slumdog Millionaire, right?
Yeah.
So I can never get the scenes of that movie out of my head. It doesn't matter how old I get. Slumdog Millionaire is one of those films, along with maybe a handful of others, that I can't get the images out of my head. And this book is like that. I cannot get the images out of my head that this book generated. And I'm reading it, I'm not seeing it. It's not like I watched this, made it to a film, adapted into a film. And of all the books in the series, this is the one where the images keep coming back of these things that happen to these people. So I don't know if and we've had the benefit of adaptations of things like The Lord of the Rings, right? So you've seen the movie and you've read the book. But you know, with this, which is not yet adapted, obviously, hopefully one day this series will be. You know, I don't need. I would love to have the movie, but I don't need it for me personally because all these images are there. They're burned into my brain after it, because that's how well Janny wrote it. And a quick comment about To Ride Hell's Chasm. I also want to explain that To Ride Hell's Chasm, I do feel the prose is, as Blaze had pointed out. Yeah, you get the same prose that you get in this series, and it is condensed into one book. And again, Janny, the plot seems really simple. Right? And it's wonderful. A bit of a murder mystery, and but for me, I think the thing that tipped To Ride Hell's Chasm over the edge for me was the themes. Right? And the themes are very personal to me. So I think that's why it really it transcended, because as Angie said, it had everything. It had the prose, it had the world building, it had everything you could ever want in a fantasy book, and then some, to make it top tier. But then to make it my ultimate favorite, it was the themes and what was discussed, especially the racism part. That just said it. It is. I did a dedicated video to that on my channel. There's a couple of videos about Therese Hatchells now out there. I think Philip Chase. There's quite a few now. So, but if you want standalones, fantasy, that's it. That's the top of the line. So.
I want to go into one thing here, which is some of the decisions that were made to build this series that kind of run counter with what fantasy is clamoring for today, where, why didn't I do a huge diversity of cultures? Why did I just set it close to a Western setting? Seems that way. Honestly, it isn't by the time you crack off Peril's Gate. Think about, if you read the Empire trilogy, what was built in that was this massively lavish civilization that was all fantasy, but based on a non-Western theme. To really delve into what I wanted to dig into in this book, I didn't want to drift too far off of what people were accustomed to reading. And it's somewhat racist to say that we have readers who are from other cultures, but they're used to reading Western fantasy, so they've done that stretch already. I deliberately chose to begin it more traditionally, because those readers that have read diversity or come from a diverse culture can handle it, and the ones in some other cultures are too fragile and cannot handle it. So, because the reason why I set that close to traditionally at the start was because of the depth of the themes and where I was going. I was tapping things that were universal to all people, universal to human thinking, universal to human development, universal to the concept of transcendence. And I didn't want the distraction of building another culture that was too different, that I couldn't really crack the nut of the themes that are central towards Light and Shadows. So even if I were to rewrite that book today, I would do it exactly the same way. I would keep certain conventional norms, even though they aren't accepted anymore. I would keep them because there are some people who are just too fragile. They can't go there. So, the theme of Hell's Chasm, some people are too fragile to even read that book. So, I see complaints that, it doesn't start out with enough women characters. They're there. As the series goes, they're there, but I started it very traditionally. Or, there are this or that, which seems very prejudiced. I left it that way because I didn't want to rock that boat. I wanted to rock a bigger boat that was underneath of all that stuff and hopefully unseat all of it. So the difference between that and, say, Empire is when I designed this world, I designed it to be the way it was. The population, human population on Athera has been there for 5,000. 5637 is the open of Curse of the Mistwraith. That is how long humanity has been on this planet. And the base population of refugees that came to Athera and took refuge was approximately in the 20,000s. You had a 20,000 gene pool to run off. By 5,000 something years, a lot of that's going to be rubbed off, sanded down. You may get the occasional throwback, but so the issues of race on Athera, unless you have a population that is isolate and kept genetic integrity, and there are a few, then you will see it. But otherwise, 20,000 people, it's going to rub off. It's not going to be an issue. It's not even going to be commented on. So the complaints that they have, this is old-fashioned fantasy. No, I tried not to stick it to certain things so that I could address a deeper level underneath that was more important for this series. Other books, I do work with those concepts, but not this.
Right. I agree with you, Janny, because I come from India, so from the east, right? So I understand and then relate to. I completely agree with what you said because for me to consume a Hollywood movie is much easier for than compared to an American consuming a movie from the south, not Bollywood, but some other language like my industry is called Malayalam. So or Malayalam or a Tamil or a Telugu or all these languages different industries, right? So if I expose somebody from America to our movies, it will be tough for them to consume because it has dance and it has like if we don't have genre movies like nowadays we do have like in the sense that what genre it is. We never had that concept in Indian movies. Like we had movies which had drama, which had action, which has songs and running around the trees and all that. It's like family affair and all that. So it's sometimes I find my colleagues who are Europeans and who are from US trying to like they don't get it, but that's not a fault of any fault from their side, but because they're not exposed to it, right? They don't have the. But for me, it's easy. I watch Korean movies, I watch European movies, I watch American movies. I was brought up, in Hollywood culture. Like the first cassette, we used to have these tape cassettes. My father bought me was Faith, George Michael's album. I even remember that. So I was brought up in that, so it's easier for me to consume. Yeah, so agree with
Yes.
that.
So as a female reader, I'm used to reading male characters all the time by male written books, and I can enjoy them. And I don't know, Paul, probably you are used to reading white characters all over the place, but when the white people got to read the black characters, they struggle, the fragility, they struggle to relate because the value system is different. So I think that you people who have had to stretch who you consider to be a main character, there are many men who will not read a female main character book.
Yeah.
And there are many Westerners who will not read an Eastern fantasy. And I just got finished with Empire, which had both female character, huge cultural shift. And and I know that even to this day, Empire has got a long way to catch up to Magician because that fragility won't cross the line. So this is not an excuse. This was deliberately built in because I did not want to exclude the fragile people from being forced to think critically. And that series forces them to do it. And some of them chuck the books because of that.
And so
that's a
I know
compliment.
this is. Oh, sorry. I know. I feel like keeping slightly off topic, but this is such an interesting conversation. I know it's not directly related to the book, but like it's kind of sad that that's the way that it is. With like, and Angie, everything that you said made sense, but it's just like to have the expectation just be like, oh, well, other people from different cultures will just deal with this because they actually know how. But it's the Western, no, you got to make sure it caters to them or they won't do it. Which I mean, I think is largely true. It's just kind of sad that that's the case. But as somebody who myself who loves a lot of classic or older style fantasy, to have that feel but with what you're writing, that is one of the things why I love this so much, because you do sometimes you go back and you read an older series and it's kind of like problematic or it hasn't aged well, or it was just a lot of the things in it you're like, oh man, that's not good when you read that in today's age. And so being able to still like get that feel where it has that really classic fantasy feel, but with modern sensibilities is fantastic.
Well, realize that the ideas for this series were conceived beginning in 1972. A lot of the development happened through the 70s, through the 80s. I wasn't ready to write this thing in the 80s. I wrote the other books, 80s, 90s. So figure where would I have fit it if I tried to clobber people with that kind of jump back then. Now maybe they're a little more ready for it, but still, I don't want to obscure the fact that this book is supposed to transcend those things. So making that comfort zone, given the time that this was built, it was kind of a necessary step. And I didn't feel like I was leaving anything out. I was doing exactly what I set out to do. And now people can either keep up with it because it does break ground that's in startlingly different directions than the cultural norms that are being shattered at this moment in literature and fantasy literature today. This shatters other ground that some other series have gone before me and done, but there are very relatively few of them. You can almost number on one hand the number of series that start to tread this territory. And whether they go as deep as these books do or not, time will tell. And you haven't read the second half of the series, so we really can't discuss that. But just this was some of my thinking. So the why of why I did what I did is a little more evident. Like I said, it's not an excuse to be as critical as you want to be, or if this goes against what you feel in your gut, go ahead and sound off. But this was my thinking, was I used very, very deliberate language, but other things I made very, very accessible to the mainstream. So I wasn't going to challenge everything on all fronts all at the same time.
Hmm.
And that's
So
one of the
the
reasons I
real
respect you so
challenges
much.
could come to the fore.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons I respect you so much, Janny. You know, I always say when you read outside your comfort zone, or if you're willing to be challenged, if you're willing to read something that I don't really like that, or I don't really like that character, or I don't really, those are the books that will eventually resonate with you because you actually went outside your comfort zone and you said, you know what, I really don't like that aspect of the book, or I really can't. But you might, when you start to ask yourself the whys, why don't I like that? Why, Janny talked about fragility, and her books and her series, they're not they're not for the fragile. And as much as she writes them from that classical fantasy feeling standpoint, the issues that she tackles, yeah, it's not for the faint of heart, right? And and she does a brilliant job with how she packages them, so they are more palatable, perhaps, for some people who might otherwise go, "I can't handle this." But and Jenny knows me really well, and she knows that like her. I want to be challenged. I want to read outside my comfort zone. I want to be, tested. I want to have my own prejudices and my own issue. Everybody has prejudices and flaws and things that I want to be challenged on them. I want a book to maybe think about. Ooh, what I really think about that particular topic, and I want a book that shows me the other side. Unflinchingly, that forces me to go, I really have to consider the other side of this argument, if there's any validity there. I want books like that. And to think about what Janny's achieved here, she's done all of that, and she's done it with this amazing fantasy series that has all these fantasy elements. It is masterclass. And that's why I will read every single thing that I can. God bless you with a long enough life to read everything that Janny's written.
I
100%.
actually named this series. When my husband asked me, okay, what genre is it? It's fantasy, right? I said, yeah, but it is more than it is philosophical fantasy. So it's a new genre I invented, like to name this. Like, how do we categorize this? There is so much life lessons also, right? If you're looking for them, you get it. Like, for example, the advice the grandfather of Arathon gives the teacher, right? That is a life lesson, right? Like, don't praise somebody more than they should be, because that could skew them, skew their view or whatever. Like, so yeah. Sorry, Nico, I interrupted you.
Grace, looks like
Oh
he's
no,
got
no.
to say.
I was just agreeing with Paul.
Oh, sorry.
So,
So after reading this series, what I've learned, I've grown as a reader, obviously from what I've been reading, but going into any new story, I've learned to trust the author to know what they are doing and where they want to lead you until you get to a point where you just can't trust them anymore. I will always give an author the benefit of the doubt if they're presenting something. Not that I would disagree with, because I consider myself an very open-minded reader in terms of themes, in terms of social events that are happening in our world and trying to bring it onto the page. And what Janny has shown me with this story is trust the author to bring you to the point and don't expect answers up front. Like some books do that because they want to hook you right away. Other books are building the base for where they want to lead you. Paul, your series does that fantastically, and I can't wait for the next book in that series. But I will never put down a book because I feel like there's not enough representation or there's not enough
Mm.
like religious um, themes putting into the work, or there's not enough conflict, or there's not enough magic or stuff like that. I just need, when I'm picking up a book, I need to not love the characters, but I need to enjoy the characters. I need to enjoy the world that I'm in, and I need to have an understanding of what type of story is trying to be told. Like, I need to know if this is going to be like more dense, something I need to really concentrate on, or is this going to be more of a fun read? I need that to be presented to me in a way where I can just be absorbed. And this is what Janny does with this series and all of her other works. And this is what the series has done for me. It's opened my eyes to what other possibilities are out there, and I'll forever be grateful for it. And this is just the halfway point. we still have 5 more books to go to see where the story takes you. I know, Janny knows. Paul, you've been to book 10, so, and Nico, you're not far behind. So
I'm getting there.
you're getting there. So we, yeah, these discussions are going to be lit, especially towards the later books.
Yeah. And you know what? Just to quickly add to that, you Blaze, I echo everything Blaze says, but Janny writes with a courage and a moral, I guess, fiber that, you know, and a willingness to confront certain things, and you have to realize too that as a writer, that takes something out of you, right? Just like Janny said, she had to put down after she wrote Peril's Gate, she had to go herself. Like it does take a lot out of you to write these series. I can tell you as a writer, to write a series, especially a long series like Janny's writing, which is again one of the longer series you're going to find out there in fantasy, and to write it with such depth and such emotion and such poignancy, and like that takes you're putting so much of yourself into this. It takes a lot of you. So Janny needs to be commended for the courage to write a series like this and to do it with such integrity. You know, and you know, because it's you know what, there's great books out there that are somewhat more fluffy, and you know, you just read them and it's a popcorn read and it's great, it's entertaining, and you know, you put it aside afterwards and it was great. But that's not this kind of series, right? And but it takes effort, and it takes a lot. It takes a piece out of you as a person to write a series like that. So imagine, you know, how much of Janny she's putting herself into writing this and to make this so incredible. So Janny's to be commended for that as well.
Yeah, I tell you what, with binging the series, I'd been doing a mix of physical and ebook, and I figured, I'm like, yeah, I'll still just, you know, and then I'll still have an audiobook going for whenever I can't actually read, and that'll be fine. Nope, I struggled so hard to get into literally anything else because my brain was just so focused on reading this series. And I'd like, so I ended up listening mostly to the fluffy stuff because I just needed something really simple.
Yeah.
My brain was like, it was not willing to engage. And so it was, yeah, I didn't get a lot of audio done as I was reading this with other stuff, just because if it wasn't simple enough, my brain just would not take it. But it's the simple stuff was generally fine, like the light stuff. Like I listened to Steven Erickson's comedy sci-fi parody series that I could listen to because it's just nonsense, and that let my brain keep focused on this, which was the big thing. But yeah, and I mean, it's when you have something like this with, you know, a vast series, I can't imagine the effort it would take to write something like this. Not only the length and the depth, but just the skill that goes into it, the emotions that go into it. I mean, it absolutely crazy. And PL, I am going to be reading your book finally this month, by the way, too. Just to note, it's fine. I'm finally going to be reading it. It's been way too long me saying that. Yeah, it's just there's so much in this series, and I do think it's Peril's Gate too. And like I said, I can't even say it's my favorite because I just have no idea how to even pick a favorite in this series at the point where I'm at. But this was I was loving the series, but this book just really, I feel like, shows what the series can be, and there's still so much to be revealed. And even I've got a book and a half left of what's published, and even I'm still like, I have no idea some things that are going to be happening. But this book was just so huge, and all of it, the way that it's written, the depth, I've never read anything quite like this, and it's where it's hard to find comparisons, because this book is just, I feel like, a beautiful show of what kind of story you can tell when you have fantasy, because this is a fantasy series, but it's not like, oh, we're gonna go slay the dragon. It's this deeply character focused and focused on a world and the depth of the emotions and the way that the magic works, where so much of that is about balance and emotion and all of the things that you can do and accomplish and talk about and comment on through this kind of story. This is fantasy's finest. This is the finest example, I think, of what you can do with fantasy that you can't do with other genres, because fantasy gives you ways to do it, and that's just, I've been just absolutely impressed and just absolutely in love with the series, and yeah, this is just that series that really is elevated beyond anything I thought was possible for me. So.
All right. Yeah. So we are at the 2-hour mark now. I know that Blaze has some
special features. You want a special feature that I prepared for you?
Oh, yes, please.
Okay. I
still have time.
Okay.
The origins of where you just went through Kiwar Cavern and the maze. Why did this happen? What was the history behind this? Davian did a lot of the major constructions on this world that were very intricate and very genius. In 459, he was the one who built the puzzle wards at Earl that guard the elementals. If you remember back to that scene, and if you look at the initiation in the maze, the puzzle wards that guard Earl, check that scene out again. So that was probably one of his earliest builds. I'm not going to go into all of his builds. Rockvale Pit was originated by the Paravians, but Davian did the finishing work that you see today in this book. So what I want to say is that early in the Third Age, most of the major trade roads ran along the coast, and most of the interior of the continent was Paravian territory. It was only crossed by foot trails. There really weren't major. There might have been a built-up causeway, but it was not designed for wagons. So there was constant pressure by mankind as mankind expanded to expand the wagon roads into the interior. And so Davian and the Fellowship, going back to when humanity settled, Davian questioned whether they should have allowed humanity there at all. Because at Peril's Gate that the penalty if humanity draws outside the lines too far, the Fellowship will have to eliminate them. So Davian said we shouldn't even take the risk. We might be better off hardening our hearts and resupplying these refugees and sending them on, not even letting them come here at all. Now, I won't go into the reason why the Fellowship decided to allow humanity's settlement, because it's not that simple. There's more reasons there. So if you think about that conflict growing, if you think about the clans were protecting the wilds, the High Kings were liaising with the Paravians. If mankind wanted something new, they had to petition for it. The Paravians had to agree. So this is charter law. By 3014, there was a breached amnesty. So the tension built to 3014 clashes between clans and townsmen, incursion into the free wilds. That's when mankind really started breaking the rules. There was a massacre that occurred in Melhalla. Tyrants to Whitehold the old way. The Cibridian were clashing with Caleste and Adruin, and so there was literally slaughter going on to demand an open way. So at that point, Davian really dug into the Fellowship and said, look, here's what I forecast. Now we're into the thick of it. These problems are only going to grow. So by 3140, he was setting out to prove his premise that mankind was unfit to have that much free will. So he built the 5 centuries fountain in Rasenpasi in the Red Desert. His purpose was to test mankind's ability to achieve long-range wisdom. So he guarded that fountain with a puzzle ward, which was the shadows. If you survived the shadows and achieved the fountain, and originally they were contained, those shadows, then you would have 500 years lifespan. Now, what did you do with it? Did you learn to handle long-range wisdom? So it screened out the people who were dummies, screened out the people who weren't aware of power at all. Only the best would get through. Only the most worthy would get through. What would they do with it? The shadows escaped when he went discorporate. That was a mistake. Originally, they were contained. You wouldn't go be affected by the shadows of Mirth unless you challenged them. So this was on the other world. So think about that. So that was the 5 centuries fountain. In 3200, there was a Kadrim scourge that exacerbated town contention. Originally, the Kadrim flew free over all of Ethera. That's what was in the Sorcerer's Preserve. That's what attacked them in the past. That's what killed Kever, destroyed Kever. So trade seeks exploitive expansion for wealth, and Davian's concern grows that the foundation of charter law is unstable. So when the Kadrim scourge exacerbates the tensions, things got bigger still. The fellowship didn't protect all of mankind from that kind of crap. If you went into prescribed ground and you ran into trouble, free will on your head be it. So you can see how the fellowship starts to become not necessarily, according to townspeople, humanity's friend. So you see those splits starting to happen. Okay, the coastal trade routes became at issue. There were famines and quakes in the western half of the continent. And there were tsunamis and giant storms that whip in off the Kildine Ocean there, because a lot of this world is ocean. The storms that slam that east coast are very powerful. So the towns begin to demand safety for their trade routes. And they said the only way we can have safe trade continuing without this disruptions of these natural events is to develop the interior and build wagon roads. So wagon roads became, in 3657 to 3871, the Coriathane actually quelled a tsunami on the west coast of Havish, more demand for inland trade. So you can see how each time there was a disaster, it built the demand. So we have a split opinion at the fellowship convocation, the stability of crown rule. In 4001, Davian's workshop at Kiwar, he starts to spend more time in his workshop that he built at Kiwar. So here we go at 4035. Human trespass reaches crisis level in Rathane. There's a violation of the Bayan Gap, which you saw Arathon cross the Bayan Gap in Peril's Gate. It was a proscribed road, an old way. The High Queen is forced to answer to it because mankind violated that pass. Trade tried to push its way through there, and she was in a late stage pregnancy. And any Paravian contact in a late stage pregnancy or any conception or any stage of pregnancy is likely to be lethal. So you saw that in the Gallant, if you read the Gallant. So she died of a miscarriage. Literally, her Cathedane carried her out of the King's Glade and she bled to death right there because she was forced into a Paravian confrontation at that time. That left Berior to inherit, and he became known as the Tyrant King because this is Spelen lineage now. He firmly limited the amount of contact because High Kings burned out quickly and the lineage was thin. So he limited contact at all until there was an heir born strong enough to be able to handle it. And the townspeople were pissed because they could make no inroads without that liaison in Rathane. So that's why he's called the Tyrant King. In 4048, Cormac Spelen was born with enough strength to do the succession. So that was going to free Berior when he became of age. So he became, actually there was a woman in between, but she couldn't, they had her as heir designate in desperation if something happened to Berior. But she was needed to continue the lineage because the lineage was thin. So she gave birth to Cormac. Then she could succeed Berior. So now they had enough strength and succession to hold the lineage. In 4056, Berior died. Silmora acceds, and she limited contact also because, again, furthering the lineage. So when she retired, she was able to retire when Cormac came of age. So Cormac's succession marked the moment when more negotiation could actually take place. In 47.5, the clamor for more trade to open access by wagon through Lanes Gap is, they try to give them Lanes Gap, which they could do by pack mules. And the townsmen complained because weather closed Lanes Gap. And you know Lanes Gap because that's where Bragan fought the pass. That tiny little, so wagons couldn't fit. They wouldn't let them dig it wider. But they said you can take wagons up to there, cross over, and pick it up on the other side. But that wasn't acceptable. So by 4075, they were really bitching. The townspeople were really pissed. By 4081, Cormac died of resonant overload, too much liaison, trying to negotiate a compromise with the Paravians that wouldn't damage the lanes. So he died of it. In 4082, he was succeeded by Ethtan's Falen, who was not as strong. He only lasted 5 years. Town interests were again frustrated because the High Kings were not getting what they wanted. So you can see the split starting to happen between the High Kings and the towns. It goes back. In 4087, his sister Erisa succeeds. In 4088, she exceeds, but she cannot be risked until she bears children. So the town interests have to languish until she's had heirs. So she has 2 daughters, Candiara and Amalek, and 3 sons, Tonfar, Stenar, and Camridian. So she was the mother of Camridian. He was the strongest of the lot. He's the one that sanctioned Crown Prince. He was awarded Alithiel for defending a Paravian princess from Drakespawn. He exceeds as High King of Rathane in 4131. At this point, Camridian is leading the negotiation for open passage rights in Rathane. Other High Kings in other areas of the continent were also trying to get inland routes for the townspeople. They were granted Orlan Pass in the Thaldanes in this time. They were granted the pass between Quaid and Spire in Havish, but Rathane's merchants remained frustrated. The land was too sensitive to give them way rights. So Davian is in the meantime, he built his library at 4133 in Kiwar, and he stored knowledge that was not suitable for storing at Althane Tower. The real dangerous stuff mankind was messing with is stored in Kiwar because it was wrong to keep it in the Paravian archive. In 4041, there's a king's convocation at Athaman. Davian proposes to build a tunnel through Kiwar to allow townsmen passage under the mountain. And it's rejected as an alternative. The townsmen held out. They wanted the Mathern Pass. They didn't want to go into any dark tunnel that they had to go through, and it took days to go under the mountain. So they rejected Kiwar Tunnel as a possible alternative. In 4041, the maze was built at Kiwar because at that point, Davian said, we got to test whether these High King lineages are going to survive this, whether they're really strong enough to keep control of the townspeople. Townspeople are getting out of hand here. They're trespassing left, right, and center. And I should add that several times there were illicit builds in the Mathern Pass by toll roads. There were illicit builds by smugglers, and they kept getting kicked out. So he built the maze to test the conscience of the High Kings, to further his point that mankind's doings will destabilize Thera's electromagnetics, and Kiwar's challenge was designed to test the compact's viability under the founding tenets of the royal lineage's capability to uphold charter law. So that was the reason that maze was built. The initial maze that Arathon went through, not from the midpoint forward, but that first half. In 4051, Camridian dies. So the best of the High Kings died. The High Kings of Rathane died in Kiwar Cavern, which Davian said proved his point that the High King wasn't born that could control mankind's inability to mind the rules. So there's where you are at this stage. Isn't that fun? It's not as simple as you thought, is it?
Not at all. I mean, now I'm curious what knowledge is stored.
Oh, you'll find out. Some of it.
Okay.
You'll see some of it. Yes.
I'm still, because there was the note too, and you didn't ever say anything with it, but that there was part of it that seemed to Arathon to be clearly designed to test a Paravian, even too. So that that little detail is still always stuck out to me. So
Chilling. The question is, were any of them stupid enough to go through? That's the back history. You know, like I said, this series is the tip of the iceberg. There is so much behind the scenes going on that I knew that deciding what to put on the page and what not to. And some of these little details will emerge in some of the shorts. Some of them you'll see some of the back history emerge all the way up to the final volume. But unless it's germane to what I'm doing on the page, it won't show. The Fellowship might know it. It might be driving some of their decisions, but there's a lot of that iceberg that's underwater as far as what you're seeing. And I'd love to go forward and develop some of this, but I got to get this series to the point where it would support the time it would take to make that happen.
Okay, so do we see this detail in the last book or any of the books, future books, or is it a trivia only for us?
Some of this you won't see at all, like the fact that the original trade routes run along the coast. And if you look at the road system, you'll see most of the roads run along the coast. And that was problematic too, because when the Paravians migrated and interfered with one of those roads or had to pass too close to a town settlement, the people had to do the water festival. They had to go to sea temporarily to get out of the way of them. But that was in the very early back history. So some of this, yes, you will see. A lot of it you may not. But this is just fun stuff to bear in mind, that some of these roads that you're walking over, or some of these old passes where there's an old way that's in dots on the map, they may become a contentious issue in coming up volumes, but now you understand what led to that and why there were certain things, why the map was drawn exactly the way it was. If I was to redraw the ancient map, it would look very different than what you're looking at today. This is not a static world. There were whole areas of the coastline that got blown apart by Drake Wars, by earthquakes. There was a whole continent that sank. There's a lot of geological activity too that changed what the map looked like. So the ancient globe would not look like today's.
Right. I mean, that thing about the fountain, not the fountain. What is the fountain?
The Five Centuries Fountain, yes.
Yeah, that's. I always wondered, like, why did he create it, right? What's the intention? There has to be some reason, even the maze. But yeah, thanks for providing this information, sir. It's really helpful. It's still thinking. Everybody is so silent, like, wow.
You'll keep thinking.
It's whenever we get these things like this, I'm just like absorbing in my mind, and like then like all the little pieces that start getting everything turning. So yeah, I absolutely just love the bits that you've given us, Janny, on these. Just the little bits of background and stuff, and it's for such a huge series, and it's so expansive too. I know we're not going to get everything, but every bit of extra information just like adds to it even more. So I would definitely agree.
Oh yeah,
Andrew. Special leather-bound editions. I want to see the art book with the history. There is so much material with imagery, but we got to wake the publisher up. We need a cult following, much like Malazan has, much like the Wheel of Time has, to really ring this series, to pull all this out, and then we'll have the support and the curiosity and the reader interest in knowing this. This is a restricted world that was forced to evolve differently, and the depths of it and the heights of it went a different direction than the world that had millions of cultures that got wiped out. Now, if you want to see the millions of cultures that got wiped out, or the cataclysmic damage and the ruins, some of the cities and the towns in this world were wrecked 6 or 7 times. There's places that don't exist anymore that had different names. The really ancient map. So, when they say, oh, only such and so series has that breadth, if you go back into the prior time periods, the prior ages, or the prior eras on Athera, there are elder powers, and it is all there. It just doesn't show here because it's not germane to this. This was not designed as a gaming world. If I had had a game campaign in each of the different eras, you would have seen all that. But I was the only one creating this, so a lot of it is in piled up file card notes, notebooks, heaps of papers. It's all there. It's just waiting to be tapped. But in order to get there, it can't be just a little cult following on the side. It can't be a specialty book anymore. It's got to bust out. I still will develop some novellas or some small scale things, but for a major work or an artwork or a companion volume, even a special edition, even getting a publisher to do an anniversary special, come on, even getting them to repair the errors in Ships of Merior, the scan errors that are in there, it's a fight. It's got to be worth the time.
Well, let's not forget how privileged we are to be able to, have Janny here to give us these exclusive snippets that you can't. The only place you could get it was having the author herself provide them, and it's just so enriching. It just adds so much to our reading experience. Janny, thank you so much for providing that. And I keep saying that in my mind, every time I look at YouTube, I see more and more Janny Wurts stuff happening, and more people talk about Janny Wurts. And I truly believe, some people are unearthing your work for the first time, Janny, and they're realizing how amazing it is, and they're telling their friends, and I really believe there is a renaissance with knowledge of your work, and of your work being elevated to be alongside those the Robin Hobbs and the Jordans and the Stephen Ericksons and all those authors in the fantasy community that if you look on Reddit and these places that people are elevating in their top writers. So it's just a matter of time, and so that's
what I hope. Enough readers get in there and enough reach the second half of the series and start talking about that. If you mark the time where that special feature is on this video, other readers will speed forward to see it, because that they don't want to sit through a long discussion, but they want that anything that we can do, because I can't do this job. The readers have to take it from here. I've done my job. I've written it, but there's a limit to how much the author can go, this is really cool, read it. Every author in the universe is saying that. It's got to get the hallmark of the readers going forward. And so that's why I appreciate every one of you for having the sheer courage to read a series that nobody is talking about terribly much. And we're just starting to crack the ice, and Blaze for helping to lead the way, and some of the other people who've also done it over the years, because each time this series began to build a following like that, there was a publishing interrupt that stopped it. Lack of availability of the paperbacks has destroyed many readers starting just in the last year. Lack of audio. Many won't even start it until we have that. And you can't have one without the other. So that's what killed this, was the publishing interrupts, plus all the cultural things that are stacked on top that have nothing to do with the work itself. So what I tried to do was keep the work as pure as I could and not be affected by all the things that were going to stop it. So I just did not give up. So now it's finished. Now we have the cake. It's baked. This is the moment. So I appreciate that you guys are getting into it. It's really warming my heart to see it happen.
Yeah. Whenever somebody talks about the series, I feel so like, I don't know the right word. I feel possessive about it. Like, okay, this is my series and people are talking about it. Like, and so like it feels like home. Like, yeah.
It's really great seeing people talk about it, and like Andrew said in the comments, I haven't stopped talking about it, nor do I plan to. Trying to get more people to check it out, but anytime I've talked about any of your Janny, any of your other books too, I would always have somebody come like, oh, you definitely have to read this one. So like there's some out there, but I'm trying to make that more to be vocal and get those people to talk about it too. And so yeah.
Yeah.
To
I agree with
answer,
Andrew.
Andrew, I don't have the rights. A Kickstarter will do no good. The publisher has the rights, and they are sitting on them with a tight fist. We have to get them interested in doing the doing and getting it started. So I would love to do a Kickstarter. I would have sold it to Audible, frankly, a long time ago. My other books are on Audible. You can get them, make the numbers on there, start to scream. Then maybe that HarperCollins will sit up and pay attention. But it will be reader pressure that makes this happen at this stage, because I've tried to buy the rights back. I've tried to pressure them to release what they're not going to produce. I think we're straddling a line right now. Discussion is being bandied. So let's, if we can kick it over the line, but it's going to take a lot of people buying these books or talking about them to show that it would support that, because HarperCollins produces them themselves. That's the way they work.
Yeah, but with audio, I think you would get more people into the series. I think because nowadays a lot of people consume audiobooks, right? And I see that, regularly readers, even who love reading physical books, they are switching to audiobook because they want to read it while commuting or doing whatever, like their chores or whatever. So if this happens, this would be incredible, because there are so many times in this book that I wanted an audio desperately, because I love doing immersive reading. And I wanted that experience because that's one of the reasons that I like the First Law series, right? How brilliant the audiobook is. And I think a well-done audiobook will do a lot. It will make a lot of
difference. It would
difference.
bring out the beauty of the prose, for one thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like trying to read Shakespeare and seeing it performed.
Mm-hmm.
When you get the audio reading of that prose, it's going to make that book happen in a way that on page some people can't access. So Initiate's Trial is in audio. You can get Initiate's Trial. And Colin Mace did the narration. He did a beautiful job.
So, I think you mean Destiny's Conflict.
Yeah, it's Destiny's Conflict. You're right. They were supposed to do Initiate's Trial, but it never kind of happened.
I was for a minute, I was really confused. I'm like, wait a minute. Is this what?
No, Destiny's Conflict is the one. Sorry, that was my bad.
Oh no, that's all good.
And Destiny's Conflict, the audio, it's awesome. I remember Colin Mace did it. I was completely immersed with it. I'm banging the table. I wanted to do the whole series. He's so gifted, and he went into it with pretty much cold, like he didn't know anything about it, and so he just killed it. So
I'm really excited because I listened to some random audiobook he narrated for a book that was just okay at best, but like the narration was still really good, and I might not have even finished it had it not been narrated by him. So I'm like, okay, so I'm really excited to see what he does with this material. But
yeah, he went off of character descriptions in a recording that I made for pronunciations, which largely he followed very close, except for two. And you could see him warm up to it as he went. But he went in there cold, just with, background notes. That was it. I would love to see him do the entire series. For my other books, Simon Peril did Master of Whitestorm, and he killed it. He just knocked it out of the park. If you ever listen to Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell or Narnia or Shackleton, he's a very, very gifted narrator, and he totally nailed Master of Whitestorm, but nobody knows it's there. Emily Gray did Sorcerer's Legacy. She was a winner, award-winning. Both of them were award-winning. And then also Cycle of Fire has a beautiful audio. Really well done. David Thorpe did it. And so, those earlier volumes, you can get them in audio. So, yeah, it's an area I'd like to see happen almost more than anything, because I think it would really bring a lot of people into the series that won't start without it.
For sure.
As a closing note, I have a question to Blaze, Paul, and Nico. So, excepting Arithon and Lysair, who was your favorite character in Peril's Gate?
Except Arathon and Lysair?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Probably Alara. She grew on me tremendously in this volume. I always love the Fellowship, but Alara takes front stage for me.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry,
Paul?
my turn. Yeah, I would say, and he becomes even more. I would say is Sulfin. He is Sulfin. He is
Okay.
definitely he becomes one of my favorite characters overall in the series, I think. And it would have been Davian, except that Davian doesn't physically appear as much as he does later on. So I did later books, I'd say, yeah. But yeah, he is he's complicated. I love messy characters. I love characters who are messy, and his loyalty to Lysier is admirable in some ways and deplorable in other ways, but he has his own unique morality, his own unique methods of achieving the mission, even around Lysier. So I really like he started. I love those characters start off as a minor character. He comes out of the grimoire and you think, okay, this is just a dude. He's the but you think, oh, wait a minute, he's the only survivor though. And then suddenly he becomes, a much more major character. I love his character and his character arc. So yeah, I'd say definitely.
That's really hard. I was thinking about it. And there are some arcs that start really pushing to where I like characters later, but I'm just gonna go for the honorable mention and say Bragan, because his struggles through this and him like literally fighting to his last ounce of strength and then past it. There were so many great scenes, and so there are definitely, I feel like, characters that I came to like more that are in this. But I think like with this book, I really, really liked his parts, and Jarrett was really good too. But Bragan, his whole kind of his whole mini arc just within this book, I really, really enjoyed. So I'm gonna go with Bragan.
Wow, all great answers. Now that you give your explanations like that, okay, maybe that's my favorite character, but I wanted to say it's Jarrett, because like the way he held on to whatever he's supposed to do, and he never gave up, even though he was blinded and his tongue cut out and all that. I was like, okay, he is now almost kind of imprisoned in his body, right? He cannot see, he cannot talk. It's like a frustrating situation. And I'm like, okay, that's it. He's done. But no, it doesn't stop there, and he does this incredible thing, right? So yeah, he is my favorite character, and that was my heartbreaking moment when he was tortured by them. Yeah. So, any closing words that you want to say?
Just prepare.
I know we could all speak for another 24 hours, but
I'm trying not to.
All I'm gonna say is prepare, because the next book, Trader's Knot, pacing really picks up, and it goes a little bit darker in some aspects. So just prepare for it. It's and the rest of the series is just the pace is gonna pick up. So it's really riveting.
And that's no joke, because when people said that, or like when Janny used to do, the pace really picks up, and I'm like, does it though? Because like I'm like, I don't know, I don't see it really picking up that much, which isn't a bad thing. It's like I love the pacing, but I get there and I'm like, okay, no, they were serious. So yeah, 100%.
I just want to say quickly, thank you, Janny, for writing this amazing series. Thank you so much, Blaze and Nico, for being amazing champions of this great series and champions, period, of writing and books. Angie, thank you so much for being wonderful in every aspect and for hosting this and bringing us all together with Janny. It's a unique and special opportunity. And as I said last podcast, you're totally underrated as a booktuber. More people need to be tuning into your channel, Angie, because you post some amazing content. And thanks for having us. And yeah, I'm a lifelong Janny Wurts fan. I'll read everything she writes. And for those of you who are on just thinking, should I really dive into this series? Again, if you say, well, to be read, I need to be well read, I need to read Malazan and The Wheel of Time and Lord of the Rings and all these series, you need to read the series too. So
Yep.
I want to thank Angie so much for hosting this so much. I want to thank Blaze for being one of the forerunners to get this out front. I want to thank Paul for being here and for writing challenging books. If you enjoy Wars of Light and Shadows, his Drowned Kingdom wrestles some difficult themes and deals with arrogant characters with crazy blinded upbringings and how they come to terms with their mistakes. It's a wonderful series. And I want to thank Nico also, particularly for zeroing in and dedicating some recent YouTube videos to this series.
Yes.
It's so wonderful to see that starting to happen. And I would hope going forward that some of the group discussions that bring together some of the major series writers or bring many of the major series talked about in comparison to each other, that this one will take its place on that kind of discussion, because it would bring something to the table, I think. So I see that right on the edge of that possibly happening. And every one of you here is helping to make that happen. And I'm privileged to know you. Thank you.
Thank you. So I want to thank all of you once again for taking the time and also for postponing this because of my slow reading. I'm so sorry once again that I had to postpone it from last week, but that gave me time to, immerse myself more into this book. Otherwise, I would have rushed and, missed so many things in the book, and I didn't want to do that. Right. I wanted to take my time, and I'll be careful next time when I'm starting this book, right, to give enough time to it. And also, yes, I agree. The book is definitely getting, the book series is getting traction. Janny's name is, we can hear in many booktube channels. People are reading her standalones also, or the Empire, etc. So it's amazing to see word of mouth spreading and what internet can do. Of course, we should push more and more, and we shall do that. And I'm really looking forward to reading the next book, even though the pace is slowing down. I don't think that will hinder my experience in any way, knowing how Janny writes. So thanks once again for all the viewers for joining and listening in. We will see you soon in the next live discussion. So thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.